There is one round to go in the AFL season. There are 10 teams still alive in season 2024, and this has got to be the best home and away season I've ever seen. Welcome back to ChatChit.
I don't have one good stat for you. I've got two awesome stats for you. So now, Essendon are going to go 20 years without a finals win.
Yep.
But did you know it's 56 years since a finals win without Kevin Sheedy at the helm?
Yeah, it's unreal. And may it last forever long.
Wouldn't mind. And my other stat, Hawthorn had a pretty good first quarter. I don't know if you were able to watch that game the other day.
Yeah, I did.
Hawthorn have played 2,104 games in their entire history. It's the 7th time in their entire history they've kicked 9 goals in the first quarter.
Jeez.
So speaking about
I love stats.
Scoring power and being dominant straight out of the gates, Hawthorn's the team you're looking for.
And let's get into our top 5 players of the round. This was an absolutely brutal top 5 to make. There were 10 or 11 guys I've got written down here that I felt had to be in the top 5, and I feel sick some of these guys aren't in there, but I'm just going to start off with my number 5. Zach Butters. Broke the record in showdown history for most disposals. Port needed that win to pretty much lock up a top 4 spot. Butters was a goal, 42 disposals, 20 contested possessions. You love that late goal just to lock in the 3 Brownlow votes and to put a highlight on the game. 10 clearances as well, and he was just everywhere.
I like it. My number 5 was Cripps. Now, he just does what he does. Like, he drags the team to victory. They were completely obliterated in terms of injuries. 35 touches, 12 score involvements, 80%, 21 contested possessions is what it is.
Very happy you had him in there. One of those guys that I felt sick to my stomach that I didn't put in.
It was tough to leave some guys out this week.
My number 4 was Jack Steele. I have no clue if you'll have any of these guys in there, but you easily could because his stat line jumped out at you because he went 2 goals, 27 disposals, 10 marks, 10 tackles. He did the old triple-double. 10 score involvements as well, but it was just as clean a game as it gets from a hard-nosed midfielder, going at 81% while half your disposals are contested, and then getting 2 goals to go along with that.
He doesn't often kick goals.
Yep, tackling like he always does, leading the game in tackles by a considerable amount, and then also leading the game in score involvements. It was just as complete a performance as it gets to take down a top 4 team.
I like it. My number 4 was Sam Darcy. Now, this guy's going to be the future of key forwards.
Yep.
7 goals. He would have been a lot higher on the list had it been against better opposition. We know North's defence is an issue, but just for me, I'm very harsh on the guys when they put up amazing performances against the worst teams. But then again, if he can catch the ball at its highest point, there's absolutely no way you can stop him.
I think he already looks like one of the best and most comfortable key forwards in the league, and he's in pretty much his first full season.
Yeah,
so
it's scary because it usually takes the key forwards a little bit longer to like gel into their bodies and get used to it.
Yeah, I don't often actually make wild, crazy predictions for the future, but I honestly think he'll be like a 5-time Coleman medalist. I think he'll be a generational key forward.
You can see it. The way he's clunking the ball in his first year.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, I'll get into my number 3, who was Brent Daniels. I just talked about a complete performance. How are you going to have a guy that spends half his time in the forward line and he gets 13 tackles with 29 disposals, going at 82%, 3 goals and 2 goal assists, 4 free kicks, 4 without conceding one. The bloke didn't make a mistake. He was damaging, he was containing at Fremantle, and he's just one of those guys for GWS that just is just building as a part of this mix which is so strong. And GWS now have won 7 in a row. We talk about this premiership runway that they're on. Brent Daniels has been a massive part, and I think he'll make the All-Australian team.
I'd add to that, but he is coming up soon. My number 3, I had Callum Wilkie.
Yeah.
Now, I call this guy the General. Never drops less than 8 out of 10. 120 plus games in a row. 25 effective disposals, career high. 6 score involvements, career high. 100% game time, 8 intercept marks. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, I'd talk about that, but he might be coming up in a bit.
Oh, okay.
My number 2, I've got Sam Darcy, who you've already spoken about. We can move on.
Well, my number 2 is Zach Butters, who we've already spoken about as well. Yeah, showdown medal, 42, 20 contested. Great form going into finals.
I'm very surprised that we had 4 players in common.
So it was a tough week as well.
Yeah, I've got Callum Wilkie at number 1. I thought it might be the best defensive performance I've seen this year, just in terms of pure defense. I don't know how many contested marks he took, except it felt like about 8 or 9.
He doesn't have a bad game though.
Yeah, he was really, really phenomenal. That entire St Kilda performance was pretty inspirational. What Ross Lyon has got them doing going into next year with no finals aspirations is pretty impressive.
My number one was someone you mentioned earlier. I had Brent Daniels, and I think the most scary thing about his stat line was the 13 tackles. How's a guy playing at half forward and he plays a bit of midfield time, getting 13 tackles? Takes the pressure off Toby Green, like you said, chance at All-Australian. Will get a lot more attention if he played for a Melbourne club. Yep. I had a look at Damien Barrett. He releases his top 5 players of the round each week. He wasn't even in it.
Unreal. Well,
so if he played in Melbourne, he'd be a shot at least number 1 or 2, maybe 3.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of players to make sure I'm not making a stupid statement, but I think Brent Daniels might be the most improved player in the AFL this season.
There's a lot of improved players.
There's a lot of really improved players.
Stay tuned, because that episode's coming.
Yeah, that'll come, so that'll be a long list. But anyway, let's move on to our hits and misses.
It's probably the last time we're going to mention them this season, but I've got West Coast as my miss. They had a real chance to get 3 wins in a row under the new caretaker manager in a packed Optus Stadium. Some life back into the club after a terrible few years. Went into the game as favourites, actually, against a smash-up Carlton and got absolutely hammered. It was just really disappointing to see after a good few weeks.
You know what's terrifying? We haven't really spoken negatively about West Coast this year. We've just talked about how it's been a promising year. 5 wins from 22 games, and this is a promising year. What this franchise has become this organisation has become over the last 4 or 5 years is pretty scary. But hopefully, we're starting to see them dig themselves out of the hole.
I'd love to have a chat and ask West Coast fans if 2018 was worth it. Like, I understand you get the premiership, but then you go. I think they came 6th maybe the year after, then out of the 8, right at the bottom. It's about 5 years in a row now. So, was it worth it?
Well, I guess that's up for West Coast fans to decide. Yeah. My miss, I just missed Thursday night footy. Oh, yeah. It was your miss earlier in the year when they were getting rid of it for the latter part of the season. Yeah. It just makes no sense to me. It's an extra night of footy. I think everyone loves it. Brings good crowds to games. I think good TV ratings because everyone's keen to see it. It makes the weekend feel a day longer. And I'm very unhappy that it's not there. I think next year I would make a massive push to have a Thursday night footy for the whole year.
I don't see why not. It must be like something to do with the TV deal, broadcasting deal, whatever. But
something logistical.
100%. My hit, I've St Kilda. So we've seen what can happen when they free themselves up. Maybe they felt a bit too much pressure at the start of the season to get results. We know they got their system a little bit wrong, was a bit too safe, a bit defensive minded. The last few weeks, if anything is to go by, they're going to be a force next year. I think we've seen what they can actually do now when they actually play good football, when it's not just let's defend and let's try and win the game scoring 9 goals. Now it's just let's defend and let's use the half-back weapons that we've got. So Sinclair's getting the ball higher up the field. Wangani Malira is getting the ball higher up the field. And they're scoring a lot. So they've really increased their scoring power later on in the season. It's just unfortunate they couldn't do it at the start.
Yep, and Rowan Marshall is such a big cog for them. He's making a charge late in the year for that open ruckman spot. Yeah, we hardly discussed him last week, except he could absolutely sneak in there with another monster game.
There's about 3 or 4 guys there.
Yep. So my hit for the season, for this round, is Carlton's win. It was one of the most impressive wins of the season to me. Just a win against West Coast, right? Except 17 players on their injury list. They were not able to bring 2 emergencies to the game because they would not have been able to field a VFL side. Like, players stepped into unfamiliar roles. We saw Brodie Kemp as a full forward when he's been pretty much a back pocket all year. They stepped up. Cripps was huge. Best player on the ground by about a country mile.
Absolute mile.
Yeah, it was. I don't care what the stat line was. He was just monstrous.
But it's the players that were injured as well. It's not just like some certain role players, the guys that fill up your team. Key forwards. They had key midfielders, key defenders out. Like, the fact that they came up.
The footy world didn't believe in them. The bookies didn't believe in them. They were an underdog to beat West Coast, but they pulled through hard, and they made us feel, or at least made me feel, that they'll get it done this week too and get into finals.
I like it. We went to our next segment talking about over and underachievers this season.
Let's start off with the underachieving teams this year. There have been quite a few, because I think there were a lot of teams that expected to make finals this year. Probably 13, 14 teams that just expected it, at least 13, 14. 2 biggest underachievers for me, Adelaide and Collingwood.
I love it because I haven't got either of them.
Oh, okay, good. Adelaide unfortunately missed out on the 8 last year. I say unfortunately because it really was bad fortune. And everyone thought they are a young list with every reason to jump up this year, and they've gone down into 15th. 8 wins from 22 games, and extremely disappointing. The lack of consistency and sort of the lack of the lack in depth that we've seen in their list throughout the season. Collingwood, there's not really a whole lot to be said. From premiers to 10th place with hardly a chance to make finals with 1 round to go.
Did you see the AFL's post on
Instagram? Well, what needs to happen?
What needs to happen? There's got to be a 200-point swing. They're going to need about 3 other results to go their way. So, they're pretty much out. I
started the podcast by saying there are 10 teams alive. There are 9 teams alive, and Collingwood's got on life support. It's on life support.
They're there, though. They're there.
The pulse is there, but they're not conscious.
I like it. They're brain dead. Okay, I'll move on to my underachievers this season. You might think it might be interesting, but I said North Melbourne were an underachiever this season. So just to put it up there, they've won 15 games in the last 5 years. So we saw at the start of the season, or a few games in, that they looked like they were improving. They looked like they were starting to move the ball around a bit more. They weren't getting beaten by 100 points as many times. But then again, we look at it at the end of the season, and it's just 3 wins. Like we expected after last season, towards the end they were starting to improve. Towards the start of this season they were getting a bit better, but still they haven't really done anything. And we've seen West Coast kind of move past them. So I just thought they've underachieved a little bit from where maybe they were looking for 5 or 6 wins this year. It looks like they're going to finish on just 3. My other underachiever is Gold Coast. So they brought in the premiership coach, really high expectations. And if you run through this team, there are stars everywhere. Forward line, stars everywhere. Midfield, absolutely stacked. Defence, stacked. Any team would dream of having that Gold Coast defence.
Collins, Ballard and Mac Andrew all sitting as key backs in your defence.
And to have a very, very easy draw and just not being able to win away really sort of ruined their season. And to say before the season, finals at a minimum, and they're out of contention already. I mean,
14th with 1 round to go.
Yeah, that's underachieved for me.
Absolutely. My overachievers, on a more positive note, I've got Hawthorn, I think are the most obvious overachiever.
Yeah, you have to have Hawthorn as the overachiever.
Beginning of the year when we were predicting our finals, I was like, I think Hawthorn are making a jump this year. But even if they make a jump, I can't quite see them in top 8. They came 16th last year.
They were exciting towards the back end of last year.
Yeah, exciting to the back end, but still came 16th last year. Yeah. Except you thought, maybe they'll jump up and contend for a bit. What they've done, they've been the best team in the AFL since round 5. They've won 13 of their 17 games since then. And one of those losses was a 1-point loss to Port. Like, they haven't played a bad game since round 5. They've really... I don't know. I don't think the bookmakers have
been
been
hammered by Geelong. There was one game.
There was one bad game. Thank you for correcting me. That does bring me to my other overachiever, which is Geelong.
Oh, we have the same too. I like it. Okay.
I thought Geelong. I think I predicted them in 14th to 16th this year, somewhere in there. I don't remember my preseason prediction, but they're now in 4th. They prove us wrong again and again and again. I probably should have known better. It is Geelong. It's Chris Scott. It's all those guys. It's your Pat Dangerfields. It's your Jeremy Camerons that just don't let you down. Tom Stewart's. Like, it's just this Geelong organisation just produces guys like this that are just going to bring a full career of winning performances. And that's what they've done again.
Like, all I've written here is I couldn't see them coming back into the top 8 this year. And they have 1 game left against West Coast to secure top 4. That's a ridiculous leap from where we saw them finishing. But yeah, we'll move into the Footy Pyramid. We have 1 out in the Footy Pyramid. Harris Andrews is out of the pyramid. Had a quiet game. Wasn't playing badly, but there's one guy I think really needs to come in. Hayden Young is in the pyramid.
Good.
Some last 6 weeks he was the best, I think was the most damaging player in the competition. Didn't have an awesome game, I'll admit, this weekend, but based on his previous weeks of form, I just think I had to get him in here.
Like Supercoach, the break even was so low.
Exactly. Yeah. It was maybe the last week, but I had to get him in before his price starts moving a bit. Joining him in the 5th tier, Tom Green holds a spot, Errol Goulden holds a spot, Zach Merritt moves down a tier, was tagged off the field by the Swans.
Desperately wanted to put James Jordan in my top 5 for that tagging performance.
I didn't even think about it, but when I was looking at Merritt's performance this week, 17 touches. He just had to move down, and Heaney holds a spot in the 5th tier. In the 4th tier, Sarong holds a spot, Dacos holds a spot, Butters moves up, and Sicily moves down. Moving up into the 3rd tier, Treloar holds a spot, the Shees holds a spot. Even though he didn't play, we saw what happens to North Melbourne when he doesn't play. And Hogan moves up again. I think he's kicked like 34 goals in the last 6 or 7 weeks. It's absolutely ridiculous what's happening from him.
That man is monstrous.
And the top 3 stay the same. Neil and Cripps in the 2nd tier, and Marcus Bontempelli sitting on top of the pyramid.
And let's jump into the power rankings. Dossie, considering that there's one round left in the season, it is crazy how different the power rankings look to the ladder, especially near the top. So let's get into it. The bottom three remains the same. You have Richmond, North and West Coast.
Quite a significant gap between the bottom three and the rest.
Absolutely. And all these teams got battered this week.
Yeah.
So not too much to say. Next up is Adelaide. I've just spoken about how disappointing their season has been, and I think there's probably a gap between them and 14th.
We haven't really spoken about the Dan Houston incident on the weekend where Adelaide were actually winning and Houston completely concussed their best player, completely changes the game.
It's so unfortunate. Dan Houston does not have any bad record of anything.
Yeah.
Was such a heated game. You can tell he probably just had that mentality of let's bloody get these blokes.
Yeah, he just turned it a little bit, and he might not play for Port Adelaide again.
As they say, the system is you elect to bump and you cop the consequences sometimes. Where do you think he goes if he doesn't stay?
I think he's going to go to Melbourne.
Ooh.
I know Melbourne's interested, and he wants to go to Melbourne.
Yeah.
Or he wants to go to the Melbourne area. I know the Demons are interested.
Interesting. Next up is Gold Coast, who, they've sat this low for quite a while now, and now their results are showing why. They're not holding on to those home wins anymore. Next up is Melbourne, and then after that, we have Essendon out of finals. St Kilda out of finals, but really have made a charge in the latter half of the year. Unfortunate to not go up this week. And then in 10th is Collingwood, who sit in 10th on the ladder. As we say, season on life support. But it was pretty inspirational what happened in the fourth quarter against Brisbane.
It would be a real Collingwood thing if they could make it to the finals from here.
It really would be. And we haven't spoken about that game. What a last 5 minutes.
I remember we were together and you actually turned it off because there was 2 minutes to go, 17 points.
Mm-hmm.
And then I texted you and
it was did you see what the hell has just happened?
Yeah.
It was unreal. That was Lockie Schultz just turned into bloody Gary Ablett Sr. in the last 5 minutes of the game.
Massive loss for Brisbane as well because
they win that. They're in the top four. Geelong gets away with a loss to St Kilda.
100% and potential for home finals as well.
Seriously. Next up is Freo, who again they sit just outside the 8. This is where they sit on the ladder, and they've now had 3 straight relatively tight losses to top 8 teams, and it's unfortunate because they put together such a good body of work for such a large part of the season.
Port Adelaide to come, so they're going to need to win that game.
Yeah, so interesting that they are still the number 1 defense in the league for the year. They've conceded the least points, and they sit outside the 8. Next up is Carlton. What a win. They have one more huge game. We were just saying off camera, it's going to be really difficult for them to get this win in the final round just because of all these injuries they have and with the form that St Kilda have, the freedom that St Kilda are going to play with nothing really on the line apart from their reputation. This is going to be a club-defining game for Carlton.
They could easily get saved in the Freo and Port game if Port managed to get the win.
Bringing Carlton's season into context, many had them as their favourite going into the year. You just look at the talent around the field, starting to get that depth as well to go along with their superstars everywhere. This looked to be their year, and now it's really on a knife's edge. Next up, Geelong. Yes, they sit in the top 4. They just seem to do it again and again and again. I don't back them in this finals. I've never really backed them, and I'm going to stick to my brand of underrating them and letting them prove me wrong.
There's a good chance we play him in the first week of finals as well.
Yeah. Now the Bulldogs, who are one of 3 teams that sit in the premiership window, meaning that they are a top 6 scoring side and a top 6 scoring defense side in the AFL. They have that profile. We know that they have talent all over the ground. Now with guys like Rory Lobb and Sam Darcy becoming dominant to add to that core, it really does look good for them. They're bouncing back after a bad loss this week. They're scary in finals.
I was going to have them as one of my underachievers. Actually, when you actually have a look through each name on their list,
it's
they
unreal.
have to be finishing top 4.
Yep, I agree. The list is ridiculous, and you just got the best player in the league sitting there as well.
Yeah, having a good time.
Yep. Next up is Brisbane. Sit just outside the top 4, and they've lost a couple in a row now at a really crucial time of the year. Talk about that premiership runway. Swans were very early. Brisbane, were they a little bit too early? Are they now dropping off a little bit?
Well, they're going to need Geelong to lose to West Coast if they want any hope of top 4.
Serious. Yep, it's no longer in their hands, which is an unfortunate thing given the form that they had after that 0-4 start.
And knowing Geelong, they just get it done.
They do. Next up is Port Adelaide. A lot of people would say that they've earned a place higher than this. They're in really solid form. They've won
5 in a row.
Won 5 in a row, including that huge win against first place, the Swans. Just a record win, and they just keep getting it done. You have to respect it. I think there's 3 teams that I back more to win the grand final. In third is the Swans, who are the premiership favourites, but still returning to that best form. They're premiership favourites in the hope that they'll get that form, just the knowledge that they have that in them. But are we going to see it? That's the question. They have not been anywhere near the best side in the comp over the last 12 or so weeks. Next up, Hawthorn.
I thought you might have jumped them one higher.
I was strongly considering it. I do think they're playing the best footy in the competition, but part of this, there's a lot of factors in this, the vibes. Part of that vibe is actually who's going to be there at the end of the season, and the fact that GWS, who have been the other best side in the back half of the year, the fact that they have a double chance is what pushes them over Hawthorn. But
did you see who got injured for Hawthorn though?
No.
Will Day's probably not playing for the rest of the season.
Sorry, I did see that, and that is devastating for them. I think the momentum that they've gained, I think that they can still be a really dominant side, except it's devastating for him personally, given that he missed half of this season as well. That's really upsetting because we just love watching Will Day play, and that's not unique to us. I think that's every footy fan.
100%. And assuming they make the 8, assuming they beat North Melbourne in the final day, they'll be the 3rd team in history to start with an 0-5 or worse record and finish in the 8.
Wow. They were 0-7 and they're in the 8. Anyway, thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.